Welcome again to Tales from the Jar Side, the video series. This is the series where I read to you my newsletter in case you don't feel like reading it yourself. So let's dive right in. The title this week, for the week of January 1st through 8th, 2023, is Tales from the Jar Side, ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot are being too helpful, function composition, the rise of Mittens, chess bot of death, and other amusing posts. The subtitle is Guy got admitted to the hospital after swallowing multiple plastic horses. He is described as being in stable condition. Oh, I need my instant rim shot here. There we go. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Kousen IT newsletter for the week of January 1st through 8th, 2023. I taught my regular functional programming in Java course this week on the O'Reilly Learning Platform and completed another Medium post on Mockito for the pipeline. Those have not yet been edited or scheduled, but they're on their way. Regular readers of and listeners to, and now, of course, viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads until somebody objects, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or viewer or listener. If you wish to become a jarhead, there's a subscription button available in the newsletter. Okay, section. ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot being too helpful. As AI, artificial intelligence, pattern matching algorithms go these days, ChatGPT is the one that gets most of the press. In fact, I think I will click on that right now just so you can see an example of it being opened up. That's going to chat.openapi.com. Not sure how that verified I was a human, but there it is. Of course, they're experiencing exceptionally high demand. I do not know when they're going to start charging for this, but those days can't be too far off, can they? At any rate, I've used it myself many times, including while writing this newsletter. This week, in fact, I was talking to a friend. It's Ed Jarhead. Hey, Jim. Hi, Jim. And he told me how he used ChatGPT to submit some progress reports inside his current organization. They tend to be very boring. It's good to have an automatic generator for that. You just sketch out what you want to say, and it comes up with a way to say it. While we were talking, I tried asking ChatGPT to generate an abstract for a conference talk on Mockito, the subject of my most recent book, the one called Mockito Made Clear, which again is completed. It's in the pipeline. It has not quite been released yet. Expect that certainly by next month, but it's definitely on the way. This is from Pragmatic Programmers, and it's in the Pragmatic Answers series. Much more about that when we get closer to the publication date. At any rate, I asked for an abstract for a conference talk based on Mockito, and it spit out something kind of plausible. I just wrote, I need an abstract for a conference talk about testing with Mockito. And it said, sure, here's an abstract. And the title was Mastering Mockito, Tips and Tricks for Effective Unit Testing. And I won't read the abstract, but you could see that they covered most of the major topics in there. One comment that felt a little funny is it said, it's a powerful tool that can help you write cleaner, more maintainable unit tests, but it can also be intimidating for developers who are new to mocking. Also, they say we'll cover topics such as stubbing, spying, and verifying behavior, as well as strategies for dealing with complex object hierarchies and third-party dependencies. Now, I'm not sure what they mean by complex hierarchies and third-party dependencies here, but I could always modify that sentence. Also, the abstract comes across as a little salesy for my taste, but that's not that unusual for conference abstracts. The phrase intimidating for developers who are new to mocking always makes me want to include the standard image from Nelson from The Simpsons going, ha ha. I suppose I should check that. Let's see. Nelson, ha ha. And here's a YouTube little clip. Ready? There you go. So that would be mocking, I would think. Anyway, but I could live with that abstract. It's not bad, especially because it took me 0 time to generate. I may have to submit it somewhere and see what happens. But that's not really why I wrote this section, and I'll have much more to say about the AI tools as we go along in the future. One of the interesting things I could do is I could like tell it to generate 10 different abstracts for the same thing and then pick one, choose from what I like. It's amazing how this is working now. At any rate, moving on to GitHub Copilot. Now, GitHub Copilot, let me click on that, is what they call your AI pair programmer. It uses the OpenAI codex to suggest code and entire functions in real time right from your editor. They show an example here in TypeScript and Go and Python and even Ruby. I'm a little dismayed that nothing Java related is anywhere near that, you know. I can, in fact, scroll down. Here's the scary part. Trained on billions of lines of code, GitHub Copilot turns natural language prompts into coding suggestions across dozens of languages. It's whose code is it being trained on, and did they give permission for you to do that, and did they know they were giving you permission when legally apparently they gave you permission? These are all issues to be worked out later. At any rate, I do have it installed in my IntelliJ IDEA IDE, and it's something you got to watch, but it can be very useful. At any rate, it's a neural network trained on lots of projects at GitHub. Exactly which ones and whether they really granted GitHub the rights to do that or not is the subject of some current lawsuits, as well as your own code. So that means the results it suggests always look plausible, even if they aren't necessarily right. You really do have to keep an eye on it. At any rate, this week I taught a class called Functional Programming in Java, and I got to the part where I cover function composition, or at least the very limited form of it built into the Java libraries. For that, I usually go to the predicate interface in the java.util.function package, where you'll define default methods add, or, and negate. They look something like this. See, there's the and methods. A default returns a predicate, takes a predicate as an argument. Same thing with not, although not is static for some reason, and or are default, and negate is also default. So I'm not sure about some of the design decisions there, but you see many of these allow you to combine predicates together. And that's what I was illustrating. So here's the code, and I actually have it open in my IDE here. Hopefully that's a big enough font. You'll be able to see that without a problem. So this is part of a larger class. So you can see I have two consumers of type string, one called a printer that writes to standard out, and one called log that writes to the standard java.util.logging.logger. So that logs at the info level. I also have two predicates of type string, one called non-null that invokes the non-null method from the objects class, objects plural, and is even, which again checks that a string length is modulus 2 equals 0, and thereby being even. The weird part you can notice right away is that non-null still has to be a predicate of type string if I'm going to combine it with another predicate of type string. Even though all I'm checking is null, I don't care what data type it is. Is it null or not? But again, it's, generics in Java. At any rate, so in my strings with nulls collection, I turn into a stream. I invoke a filter with non-null and is even. There's your function composition. And then I do a for each method on the result with printer and then log. And it does both the short circuiting logical and then the print. With both the printing and the logging. In fact, if I execute that, you'll be able to see it run. Let me move that up a little bit. And you can see there is the print and then log and then print and then log. And I didn't wind up with a race condition, even though both standard out and standard error are going to the console, but it worked out just fine. And you can see it's doing all the different steps here. So I've done that demo many, many times. I do that in my class. And that also use both the and method and the default and then method from consumer. The Java library lets you combine consumers with consumers, or predicates with predicates, or functions with functions, but it doesn't include an easy way to combine consumers with functions or functions with predicates or any other combination. One of my students this week, and this is where things got interesting, one of the students, who clearly had more of a mathematical background than most, asked about true composition. I mean, what real function composition is, which basically means if you have a function in math that maps a type A to a type B, and then a function that maps type B to type C, the composition of those two functions would map a type A all the way to a type C. This is exactly the sort of thing Java does not have built into its standard library. Now, I reproduced the question, or reproduced his statement of the question, in a comment in the code. It looked just like that, and I wrote it out. But again, the student's the one who suggested it. See, F maps A to B, and G maps B to C, and then the combination of F, G, and F of X would be G of F of X, which would map A to C. And that's pretty much how he wrote the question. And I said, well, you could write a function in Java that did that. Let me think a minute, and then I hit the carriage return. And I don't know if it'll do it here, but there's the comment. And again, I just hit a pause here, and actually it's suggesting everything but that, isn't it? Figures. There's my little GitHub Copilot. Oh, seems to be disabled at the moment. Hang on, let me pause. I re-enabled the GitHub Copilot window, which you can see over here. I don't know why that went away in the first place, but you could see that it offers a whole range of solutions. Well, when I did this the other day in class, I put my cursor just a couple lines below, and it generated this function automatically. I mean, there's a compose function that takes function F and function G. F takes two generic types, A coming in and B coming out. G takes two generic types, B coming in and C coming out, and returns X arrow G dot apply of F dot apply of X, which should do exactly the job. So my response was, or you could, I was going to say it. Then I said you could write a function in Java that did that. Let me think a minute. And when I hit the carriage return, GitHub Copilot immediately went, oh, well, here. So I stared at it and went, well, of course you could just do that. Now that is composition in a nutshell. Now it's restricted to functions, but that's generally okay. I don't really care what type's coming in and what type's coming out. I just want to see if I could wire them together. And that's what a function is. It's got one element coming in and one coming out. But it even was smart enough to come up with the word compose for the function, and I didn't give it any hints of that at all. So I'm not sure where it got that. So the first time I kind of wondered out loud whether this AI thing is really going to put us all out of business, put developers out of a job. But really, don't worry about that. I mean, it will it is going to generate a lot of code, but you kind of have to know what it's generating. You have to understand it. You even have to know how to state the problem in a way that GitHub Copilot will understand well enough to produce what you're looking for. So then I went back to good old ChatGPT, that one I was showing earlier, and said, hey, generate a test case for this function, and here's the test it produced. So this was generated by ChatGPT, and you can see here there's two functions, one that does addition, one that does multiplication by 2. So this adds 1, this multiplies by 2. And when they did the compose of F and G and applied it to 1, well, 1 plus 1 is 2, times 2 is 4. That should be the result. The only thing is like, yes, but no, that will work and it is correct, but I didn't intend to use integer as the input and output for both of them. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, was I could map different types. Part of the point of this exercise was to have the first function go from one type to another and the second go from that result to a third. So I wrote this test. I used string : length to map from a string to an integer. I did my even check on the length, an integer, to go from integer to Boolean. So now my compose goes from a string all the way to a Boolean, and I could test it out by invoking apply on the strings even and odd. And I'm kind of taking advantage of the somewhat amusing fact that the string even has an even number of letters and the string odd has an odd number of letters, which thank goodness for that. At any rate, that's my own sense of humor involved as well. But I may be deluding myself, because then after I did that, I went back to ChatGPT and said, hey, that test used integer for the input and output types of both functions. Can you come up with a different test that uses different types? And it said, certainly. Here's an example of a test case that uses different types for the input and the output of the functions being composed. And look at that. I mean, they used integer colon colon parse in. So that's mapping from a string to an int. There's my even check to go from integer to Boolean. And when they did the composition, they said apply it to the string 4, which will then parse the number 4 out of it. And 4 is in fact even, so that should be true. Interesting that it used the assert equals of true rather than assert true, but whatever. So of course it did. I mean, I guess that's a good thing, right? Nut bunnies, I quit. So I mean, this is going to have a big impact on all of us, and I am continuing to play with it. Okay, so much for that section. Next section, the rise of Mittens, chessbot of death. Another theme I tend to revisit in this newsletter, if you followed it for any time at all, is the chess world, the world of the game of chess, especially when it breaks through to what we euphemistically refer to as the real world, quote, real. That doesn't quite qualify here, but there's been an event, and I want to let you know about it in case you didn't know. I have had accounts for years on both chess24.com and the open source server leechess.org. Chess24 I use mostly to watch major Grandmaster tournaments. As a spectator sport, it's a lot of fun, and they have really good commentators. I know they normally simulcast those shows over on YouTube as well, but I'm comfortable going to their site and watching from there. I don't do much else there, even though they have lots of opportunities, and I still haven't played any games there. As an aside, by the way, another running theme that I covered on earlier newsletters was the battle between Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. Last month, Magnus played in the World Rapid Championships and the World Blitz Championships, which were held back to back. And the dreaded Hans Niemann, he of the $100 million lawsuit for defamation against Magnus and Hikaru Nakamura and Chess24 or Chess.com actually, and others, for accusing him of cheating, was also, so Hans was also in the tournament. And Magnus was in excellent form and in fact wound up winning both tournaments, giving him the so-called Triple Crown. He's the standard time world champion and the Blitz champion and the Rapid champion all at the same time. Very impressive. At any rate, Niemann could have wound up facing Magnus, and we don't know what Magnus would have done under those circumstances. Niemann was in good shape, but not great. He did okay, but not well enough that he ever had a chance to get paired against Magnus. So we know Magnus had something prepared for that, but we didn't get to see it. Oh well. The leechess.org site is free. It's open source. It's, by the way, it's written primarily in Scala, in case you're interested. So there's a JVM involved. At any rate, it's an open source server. I really like it. I watch the Leechess TV all the time, which just follows whoever the highest rated player is playing at the time. I'd also upload all my over-the-board tournament games to Leechess Studies, as they say there. So that allows me to let the computers there, like Stockfish, etc., check and find out and tell me where all my mistakes are, which is a lot, At any rate, I also have an account on Chessable, which is where I purchased a few, courses there for openings or tactics or endings. And I worked hard on them off and on periodically, but I haven't visited in a while. When I went back, it made me log in all over again. I even have an account on one of the oldest ones, the Internet Chess Club, chessclub.com. I used to use that back in the 90s. Because a few of the online tournaments that I played last year, which are officially rated by the United States Chess Federation, took place on that site. The only major chess-related site I've never had an account was chess.com. I don't know why I resisted it so much. Maybe it's just because they're the biggest and I tend to root for the underdog. That tends to be kind of depressing. The whole point of underdogs is they lose a lot. I mean, they are underdogs after all. Maybe it's because I was already subscribed to many servers and didn't want to add yet another, and I didn't. But a month or two ago, when the company behind chess.com bought Magnus Carlsen's so-called Play Magnus group, again, I almost jumped in, but I didn't. And then along came Mittens, who I heard about this week. Here's a picture from an article at esports.gg. So if I click on this, I think that'll open it up. Right. The name of the article is "What is Mittens? A Chess Nightmare Behind an Innocent Kitty Bot." Seriously. Um, Meet Mittens, an adorable pure evil who wrecked catastrophe, right? Oh, wait a minute. Catastrophe. I need. There we go. In the chess dimension, which that was the subtitle of the article. Well, apparently, at the beginning of the new year, chess.com added a series of computer opponents. They all use cute cat avatars, which play to different strengths. According to the article, actually, I can show you in the article itself. Here's the little one with the little pictures. There's Scaredy Cat, which is rated about 800, so that's not very good. And Angry Cat's rated about 1,000. Mr. Grumpers here is 1,200. Katsperoff is rated 1,400. Get back to that in a minute. And then there's Mittens. So the Katsperoff is a pun. That's a pun on Garry Kasparov, his name, the former world champion, still playing but not active, one of the greatest players who ever lived. Mittens, if you go to the chess site, has a rating of 1. Now, that's not even physically possible. You can't do that. So they have to have set it that way. But it is nearly invincible, and it knows it. So here's a little picture of comment it made during a game. Meow, I am Mittens, destroyer of kings, he. Or I am inevitable, I am forever, meow, he. And yeah, it does that. It harasses you during the game while destroying you. I watched a couple of YouTube videos last week where Hikaru Nakamura himself, I mean, if you're not aware, he's one of the top 5 players in the world. A huge streamer. I mean, his Twitch stream is probably the biggest of any chess player out there. Millions and millions of subscribers. At any rate, I watched him get trounced by Mittens, although he did manage to hold it to a draw one time. And the whole time he's complaining about saying it's not that good and he's just not getting good positions against it. And you're like, okay, you know. But at any rate, you can find the YouTube videos if you like. They're all taken as clips from his Twitch stream. At any rate, what the heck? Now I have an account on chess.com. I played the bots. It actually set up a series of games for me to figure out where I fit. And I'm probably a bit better than Katsperoff, but that's about it. Of course, I wound up playing Mittens once and got annihilated, but actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but there was no doubt I was going to lose. I mean, that's definitely true. If you happen to have an account on chess.com, my handle is Kenneth Cousin. It happened to grab that before I even was paying much attention. I think it grabbed it from my email address. So, you know, look me up or send me a challenge or whatever. Maybe I'll see you there. I plan to avoid Mittens. It seems though that Magnus, naturally enough, does seem to hang out there, and I know because I watched him play Blitz with one of the new young Indian grandmasters. I think it was Pranav or whatever. He's 16 years old grandmaster. At any rate, I watched Magnus play Blitz for about an hour when I should have been finishing this newsletter. Next section, news and other jokes, and it's been quite a week. So speaking of the House, meaning House of Representatives, like most people, I was absorbed in the ongoing disaster going on in the House of Representatives as Republicans tried 15 times to elect a speaker before finally getting their guy through. That was appalling, but the social media posts were actually pretty good. So here was one that said, look, maybe strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is the basis of a system of government. Which is an excellent Monty Python reference. I was very happy with that. I was going to add the YouTube video, but it's easy enough to find, and any reason to watch more Monty Python the Holy Grail is a good one. So that's a clip from Holy Grail. This one from the J.R.R. Jokin instead of Tolkien, one that said, let's pick the next Speaker of the House by offering a guided tour of the House to 6 randomly chosen children and their families, weeding them out one by one in a series of character tests with odd and unsettling musical numbers interspersed between them until one child remains. And I don't know if I got the point across, but the idea there, that's clearly Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or the older Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, if you prefer that one. I will much prefer the Gene Wilder interpretation, of course. It's an interesting movie that demonstrates the incredible charm that certain Hollywood actors bring to the table. Because boy, he's an awful, despicable person, isn't he? I mean, really, Willy Wonka is just terrible, and it takes the charm of someone like Gene Wilder for you to go, wow, I like this guy. Yeah, okay, good luck with that. Any rate, I thought that was clever. Then this one came along from Jason Kirk, and he said, "Then Peter came and said unto him, Lord, how often should Kevin McCarthy lose this vote? As many as 7 times? Jesus said unto him, Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. Well, it didn't make it to 77, but it did make it to 15. This image here brought back some memories. There's no song to explain this stuff. That's I'm Just a Bill from the old Schoolhouse Rock um, video. I'm sure that's on YouTube as well. Not hard to find those these days, and I grew up with those, so that I enjoyed that reference. There was also a good one about Kevin McCarthy finally having his quinceanera, which again a joke on the number 15 there, but I didn't save it and I couldn't seem to find it. There was another one about Republicans being incapable of a peaceful transfer of power, even when it's to themselves, for their own party. That does not bode well for the future, but we already knew that. Okay, unrelated but funny post. Tom Galt published on Twitter his latest cartoon that he sends to the New Scientist every week or month or whatever. Said, that's the Department of Paradoxical Geometry, but don't ask me about their research. I can't even understand the building. And yeah, good luck figuring that one out. Makes your brain hurt just to look at it. I also thought this was pretty clever. You have to look at the question and the response. And the question was, how do I keep my cat off my PC? And there's a little picture of the cat on the PC. And the response, of course, was change your password. Oh, yeah. Somehow, I don't think that's going to work. I also like this one. This one apparently has been making the rounds. My wife saw it on Facebook. It said, a meme I didn't say, Grand Moff Tarkin evacuate in our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances. Death Star officer, but sir, we've just learned that John Wick's dog was on Alderaan. Grand Moff Tarkin, ready my shuttle. Yes, a John Wick joke, even after all this time. John Wick and Star Wars together. Boy, that's not a combination you'd necessarily expect. I like this list of murder weapons in the new so-called woke version of Clue. There's been some criticisms about the update because everything's at a culture war now. This said, here is some new woke Clue comes with new murder weapons. A cutting remark, which, okay. Bad dragon dildo, I have to admit I don't get that one. Unfiltered selfie, yeah, that's a murder weapon. Nut allergies, sure. Long COVID health-related issues, yes. Microplastics, and of course, Greta Thunberg. That fits in with last week. That's great. Anyway, I thought that was good. And last was this proposed idea from Esther Schindler saying songs you should never play at a funeral. And she started with Highway to Hell. Yeah, okay, that would not go over well. If you look at the responses to that post on Mastodon, somebody suggested I Will Survive, or another one Bites the Dust. Hit the Road, Jack. Yeah, that's a little harsh. At Last from Etta James. And of course, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead from The Wizard of Oz. Yeah. One last thing. Thank you, everyone, for the kind words that you sent to me during my COVID convalescence last week. It was not fun, but I know a lot of my friends, a lot of others, people have had a much worse experience than I did. So I was ill and I was isolated, but I was never in any real danger or anything like that. I finally tested negative Saturday, so just the other day. I posted at the time that now if I get out of breath going up the stairs, I have only myself to blame. But several people, rather than laughing at that, said, well, it can easily take a month to recover, really. So I'm going to continue to blame the disease for any physical issue I have for as long as I can get away with it. The video version of this newsletter is right here, so enjoy. As a reminder, you can see all my upcoming training courses on the O'Reilly Learning Platform here, and you can see that this week I am teaching Getting Started with Spring and Spring Boot. This one happens to be taught in the APAC time zones, so that will be evening time for me, but hopefully a more reasonable hour for those in the Asia Pacific time zones. I wrote another Medium post, but again, I haven't talked about it yet, and I'll publish this video recording. This week, in addition to that, getting started with Spring and Spring Boot, I don't really have anything else on the calendar, so I'll try to put together another Medium post, and of course, this recording. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. But don't worry about supporting us on Patreon or PayPal because there is no Patreon or PayPal. This is all completely free. I just hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for listening. Take care.